Why did I buy a Quad Cortex, and why you should too? Hey friends, welcome back to the channel.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No! This is Sebastian, and today I want to talk about why I personally bought a Quad Cortex and why I think it's a good idea for you to do so as well. For me, it comes down to two things, that is ease of use and flexibility. So let's get into it. So number one, ease of use. This thing is super intuitive. If you have used a smartphone for the last 15-20 years, you know how to operate a Quad Cortex. That is as simple as I can make it for you. This is not a menu diving device. I am not a menu diving person. What turned me off of Fractal is that I have to go menu diving for changing even the slightest thing that I wanted to do. And it's not friendly at all when you're on stage. So it is very much a device that's focused on connecting it to the computer. And I don't always have a computer handy, so I like to be able to do things on the fly. I change a lot of things on the fly. Every Sunday that I'm at church, I'm changing out different parameters and trying out different things. Having that big, intuitive, colorful touchscreen is a must for me. That is something that I use constantly. I use it with the computer as well. It's great, but I like to actually use it on the device more, if that makes sense, incredibly enough, just because everything is just laid out very thoughtfully. To me, it makes sense where everything is. Everything is color coded, so you don't lose track of anything as well. To me, that ease of use is just game changing for me. Another thing for me is that it is super lightweight. So right now it lives kind of in my pedal board because I started incorporating outside effects, mainly like drives and things like that, kind of offloading. But that thing by itself is super lightweight, and what's wonderful about it is that you can use it as an all-in-one platform. It sounds fantastic. It does not need the external drives or FX. I just do that by choice. Now that size does not come with caveats, let me tell you. If you come from the Helix side of things, you know that the only way to get like the maximum DSP and, you know, get a really comprehensive rig, you need to have the big ones. Because if you go for like the LT or the Stomp or the XL, those come with the caveats of you can only have one or two effects running at the same time. The DSP is a lot smaller. That is not true with the Quad Cortex. That is the big flagship model. They now introduced a Nano Cortex, which is kind of like a different beast altogether. Speaking on the Quad Cortex, you don't have to compromise, even with having such a small size. Now, one thing that I have kind of read about a little bit online is one of my main factors that I like it. That's the touchscreen. And I know this is kind of a turnoff for a lot of people just because technology kind of has evolved everything into touchscreens. You know, cars now have touchscreens and everything is like a touchscreen. And I get it, it's annoying, but you can't deny it's like super intuitive, and there's a reason why we've kind of transitioned into that. I get why it can be a little annoying to some people, especially if you're like purely an analog guy. You know, you do still have things like the rotary encoders where the pedals themselves, you can use them to rotate things and make adjustments. I use that all the time, so I'm not like awkwardly sliding things. I know that can be super awkward, so I use the encoders a lot. Like I'll just press a button and then like I'll put it into the setting that I want. So for a lot of people that's a minus. For me, that's a plus. So the second point that I want to make, and the second kind of main reason, and this is a big one for me, is flexibility. So this thing has an insane amount of I/O. That's input outputs for anyone that's not aware. This is an insanely powerful tool, not just for live use, but fully supportive of the studio environment. And I'm gonna give you my take on it and what I've done with it, just to kind of give you the inkling on why I think this is true. So today, I was at my church, I was playing one of the worship services, and the other guitar player actually forgot his amp. He's kind of like a pedal board amp guy, and his pedal board cannot connect directly to the board because it doesn't have an amp simulation. So what did I do? I said, okay, no worries. Let's put you into the input 2. Since I'm not using the full DSP anymore because I'm offloading a lot of effects, I put him into input 2, and I actually sent out a completely separate signal into another one of the outputs, because you have two XLRs that don't have to be linked, so that's two separate outputs, and then you have two line outputs, which again are not linked. You can link them, but they don't have to be linked. They can be completely independent signals, with completely different sets of panning and gain staging and things like that. So I was able to run the entire service, the two of us, in one single quad cortex. And I know a lot of bands do this. This is a very common thing where they'll have the two guitarists or the guitar and the bass, they'll both be running into the quad cortex. Of course, if you have like a super complex rig with a lot of different effects, you're going to run out of DSP very quickly. But if you were using a simpler type of rig, which in this case, I was able to kind of dumb it down a little bit to get a good sound, that was something that really saved the day, because I wasn't then stressing of having to, figure out how I can do both guitar parts at the same time and things like that. I was just able to come, play whatever I needed to play. And all it took me was, I think, like 2 or 3 minutes, and we were off to the races in record time. So speaking of another moment where I was able to take advantage of the full flexibility that I'm offered with the outputs in this case, I was playing a live gig, and if you know me, I play almost every Sunday, but at my own church where I'm the sound guy, so I obviously have everything that I need there. But in this case, I was playing an outside gig where I needed to run amps. Problem is, the sound guy was not very good, and I asked him like, hey, do you have mics? And he only had like one. I really wanted to run the stereo. I could have done mono, of course, but I wanted to run the stereo rig because that's just kind of what I have and that's what I'm set up for. And it was this moment where I didn't feel like compromising, because you realistically shouldn't always have to. So what did I do? I had my stereo amps with me. I was able to feed him the XLR out direct into his console. He got the full stereo signal, and I was able to run my amps as a monitor just for me. So what we did just a very small line check. It wasn't even like a full-on sound check. He just put in the volume on the outside, and he's like, okay, put your amps, firing them up. I just put them nice and quiet-ish. I was with the drums right next to me, so I just wanted to compete with just basically the drums, and just so I could hear myself, because there was no monitoring. This was not a situation where there was any monitoring. So I was able to monitor myself in a stereo configuration. Sounded amazing. Sounded okay on the outside as well. So that's another way where I was able to take advantage of the full flexibility that the Quad Cortex provides me personally. So another big reason on the flexibility side is the ability to just run external pedals. So one thing that other people that have multiple platforms will tell you is that the Quad Cortex is extremely well at taking pedals into the front of it, or in an effects loop or things like that. Granted, this is not unique to the Quad Cortex. There are plenty of other ones that take pedals very well, but the Quad Cortex is just the one we're talking about today, and I can vouch for it. A lot of people vouch for it. And the fact that you can have your own kind of flavors of drives and compressors. I'm not a fan of the compressors inside the Quad Cortex. I really like analog compressors. I have the Ego from Wampler there. I really like that compressor. It's really, really nice. I'm not a fan of the digital ones. And this is not including only Quad Cortex. I've tried them on other platforms. Have never found a compressor that I actually liked. This one I actually like. And I'm able to run it inside without it having a bunch of messy gain staging. I can trim the input and output. See that video over here. But you can trim the input and output of it. Pedals not affecting your gain staging going into the amps and things like that. So that flexibility of being able to run external pedals and not just run them into the front of it, but also into the effects loop, because it has a stereo effects loop. To me, absolute game changer. Well, there you have it. Those are the two main reasons why I personally bought the Quad Cortex, that being that ease of use and that flexibility. If you have other reasons why you bought the Quad Cortex or why you didn't buy the Quad Cortex, maybe tell me why you hate the Quad Cortex. If you have any thoughts at all, I would love to read about them. Share them down below. You can also download my Quad Cortex presets if that's something that you're into. They're all free. Check them down below. See you in the next one.